Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the story mode. This is another tier list for you this week. We are going to be talking about Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit franchises, the films that are in these franchises. With the Lord of the Rings TV show starting tomorrow, I wanted to dive into some of the stuff from the past. So I'm going to be ranking every single Lord of the Rings and Hobbit film, yes, including the animated ones as well. Before we do so, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to this channel for continued content. I'm going to be covering a ton of different things. And actually, I know I've been saying it a lot, but I do have a lot of stuff coming now for this channel. I will be releasing the following day a Lord of the Rings character tier list from the films as well. And then on top of that, I will be doing my predictions for D23 as well as the Phase 6 predictions for what those hidden Phase 6 movies in the MCU are, as well as a Switch rankings and a couple other tier lists coming out here soon and some reviews for further stuff. So keep checking out this channel. And if you haven't checked out Star Wars Lads, that is the Star Wars channel that I'm on every single week where I make videos about Star Wars. If you're interested in Star Wars at all, that is where I'm talking about Star Wars, which, if you don't know, is my favorite movie franchise of all time. But Lord of the Rings is a very close second. And so I cannot wait to dive into this video right here. So let's bring in the tiers right now. So first, let me explain my tiers. I always do S through F, but I always add a quote to it. Also, top fives for S never go over 5. It always stays 5 or less. Probably not going to be a factor in this list. Okay, let's dive into these tiers right now, starting with The Hobbit, the first ever animated Hobbit film. It's not as bad as you would expect. It's a very, very brief, fast telling of The Hobbit, but most of the content from the novel is here, just really sped up. Actually, didn't hate this. It's pretty decent. Nothing special by any means. It's not like it's gonna make you fall in love with the series like the Jackson films will, but it is relatively good for its time period. The animation is decent, if not a little cartoony, but I actually did enjoy this. Now, when it's compared to the live action films, even the Hobbit films, I don't think this is that level. But if you're looking for a very simplified version, sped up telling of The Hobbit, maybe you're trying to get the Spark Notes version, this is the version for you. I'm putting it in D tier just mainly because of the rest of the competition. Okay, so now we move on to Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. This is kind of a famous version of this story. I love this art, by the way. I put it in the background right here, as you can see. So this is one of my favorite Lord of the Rings art pieces, but the movie I found to be pretty dull. It is a telling of the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. Surprisingly, it concludes nothing from Return of the King, but also includes a very sped up version of the Two Towers. It's out there and weird. The animation that Bakshi uses in this film, he does a combination of actual animation, 2D animation, cartoon animation, but also uses rotoscoping and live real actors and rotoscopes them out and makes it into an animated thing. The contrast there is very strange, very avant-garde, which is interesting. And this is a fun film to go back and watch from a historical perspective, from a look at the first really true attempt at adapting Lord of the Rings on film. But it is very boring. It's hard to get through this one. It's nearly 2.5 hours. Still, for the crazy attempt at animation, for that kind of historical context, I don't want to put it down an F because I don't think it's truly a bad movie, but I found this very dull and it's not given much life of its own like the books are or like the Jackson films are. So I'm going to put it in D behind The Hobbit. So then you have Return of the King, which is a very loose third part of this kind of like mini trilogy here. This one is also strangely like a musical. There's so many songs sung by bards and by just other characters telling the events of what happened to Frodo and Sam when they tried to destroy the ring in Mount Doom. Basically, it's the Frodo and Sam stuff of Return of the King mostly, and they are on the cover of this art. So it's mostly their story, and it's told from actually after they had already destroyed the ring, so it kind of loses that anticipation. It's a very strange movie to have released. And also just titling it Return of the King and not titling it with any Lord of the Rings seems like it would defeat the purpose of marketing this. I don't know, very odd. Definitely the worst of the Lord of the Rings movies I've seen, though. So now we finally get into the Jackson movies, the 6 Jackson movies that have come out, starting with the Fellowship of the Ring, which is an all-time classic film. It is one of the greatest fantasy origin story first movies of any fantasy TV show or film ever. It sets the stage so brilliantly with its characters and its world. The way it opens up with Galadriel narrating everything that happened, and the way it's able to build this world and give you the entire history of Middle Earth, but in 5 minutes, it's quite impressive. And the pace of this one, even though it is slower paced in general, but the book for this one is a lot slower paced. There's far less action. It is building this entire world before the second and third ones can jump off and really progress the narrative as fast as possible. This one takes its time, and the extended edition definitely takes its time getting going and getting you out of the Shire. But once it does so, I think this movie moves at a pretty fast clip. It also has so much to offer in terms of its grandness and scale, really getting you used to Middle Earth and the way everything looks. The elves, Mines of Moria, the Balrog, all those scenes are such incredible set pieces, and the acting in this, the character work in here really gets you attached to everyone. I've loved this movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm definitely putting it in S tier. So then we have The Two Towers. The Two Towers was one of the great sequels of all time, and it moves at an incredibly rapid pace, even though it is still 3 hours like The Fellowship of the Ring. But it's one of the fastest 3 hour movies you'll ever watch, where Fellowship starts to feel a little bit of its length because it has so much it's trying to teach you. You have to stay locked in and really pay attention. This movie moves very, very fast, relying more on Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas and the Rohan stuff than pretty much any of the other plot lines in here. The Sam, Frodo, and Gollum stuff add a nice bit of drama. So I actually still love The Two Towers, and having just rewatched it again for probably like the 10th or 15th time, it's really close with Fellowship, and I'm not really sure where to put the other. One is a great origin fantasy film, like a first movie in a fantasy trilogy that really introduces everything, does it better than even seasons of television do. Two Towers is one of the great sequels, a very fast moving film, very exciting film. They're very, very different from each other. Golem in this one versus no Golem in the other one. I go back and forth. I think for me, still, I might lean Fellowship just for the world building aspect. But again, I'm putting Two Towers in S tier, so it's not like there's a big gap between the two of them. So finally, we have Return of the King, the last Jackson movie in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's the best. I'm putting this one at the top of S tier. It won Best Picture. It's tied for the most Academy Awards ever for a film. It's one of the only movies, I believe, to ever win every Academy Award it was up for. It's just one of the greatest movies of all time. 3.5 hours, but it feels like an hour and a half. There's so much action here, but there's almost so much heart, so much character, so many stakes. Every character's at their best here. You have some amazing Gandalf moments, amazing quotes from him. You have some great stuff with Aragorn, as you would expect in a movie called Return of the King. Legolas and Gimli's relationship is furthered. The Rohirrim and Theoden and Eomer and Eowyn, all their stuff with the Witch King of Magmar, that whole battle in front of Minas Tirith, excellent. One of my favorite scenes in the whole film is the Faramir scene where he attacks Osgiliath and nearly dies with the Pippin song in the background. Merry and Pippin are the best. This is Pippin's best movie for sure. Then you have the Frodo, Sam, and Gollum stuff, which works really well as kind of an odd couple pairing in the Two Towers. And eventually you progress and see the seediness behind Gollum's personalities and the way he feels betrayed constantly. And I think Elijah Wood doesn't get enough credit for the way he plays Frodo. You see in his face the progression of somebody who's dealing with the burdens of the world on his shoulders. And Golem's the only other person that relates to that. I think all of that works so well. It's heartbreaking when, semi spoiler if you haven't seen this movie, when Frodo initially tells Sam to go home after they went on this entire journey together. That for me, that was always heartbreaking. And then just the whole relentlessness of Sam, everything, can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. All of it. It's so good. One of the best movies of all time. It's in my top two or three favorite movies ever. Definitely at my top of S tier. So now we have the Hobbit movies, which are definitely the most controversial and probably the ones when you're watching this video, you're most interested in seeing where I'm going to rank them. And what are my thoughts on the Hobbit? Do I hate them? Do I love them? But I actually think An Unexpected Journey is one of the best movies in the Lord of the Rings / Hobbit franchise. I love this movie, and maybe it's just the 2012 hype nostalgia coming back to me. I read the novel that year for school before I saw this movie, and I was just excited because I loved the book. and I was binging Lord of the Rings over and over and over again because it's some of my favorite movies. I loved this whole thing building up to a new Lord of the Rings movie that I could see in the theaters, the new Middle Earth movie that for me was the first time watching it in the theaters. And I absolutely loved An Unexpected Journey. I think it sticks more toward the novel than any of the other Hobbit movies does. And when it does, it takes those scenes and expands upon them, gives them a bit more life, a bit more character to the dwarves, a bit more character to the goblins, the trolls, Bilbo, Gandalf. Gandalf, just as usual in Tolkien's work, disappears and comes back. We can see what Gandalf is doing. I actually like a lot of the additions in this book, or excuse me, this film. I also really love the scenes with Saruman, Elrond, Galadriel, and Gandalf. Those meeting scenes, a lot of that stuff that's foreshadowing what happens in Lord of the Rings, but obviously this is so many years before, about 60 years before Lord of the Rings, that it can't really truly tightly connect. But the stuff that it does connect, I think works really well in An Unexpected Journey. Martin Freeman's Bilbo Baggins is one of the reasons why this movie's so high for me. I think he's absolutely perfect as Bilbo Baggins. Richard Armitage's Thorin Oakenshield, like he's given so much more characterization in this film and really the whole trilogy than he is in the novel. I really like the portrayal here. I like what they do with the dwarves. I love the opening scene with the dwarves coming to the door. That was one of my favorite scenes in the books, and I really, really enjoyed it here. Love the song. Misty Mountains was in my playlist forever. I love this movie, but I'm not going to put it in S tier because it does have some flaws. I will put it in A. So next we get to the Desolation of Smaug, and the Desolation of Smaug is where the additions to this franchise, to the novel, really that Jackson adds and the writers add to this film trilogy starts to weigh down. Desolation of Smaug doesn't just go for lore expansions, it goes for like cringy character work. And I think we all know what I'm talking about with the dwarf elf romance. Look, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea in concept, but the problem is we already saw the Legolas and Gimli relationship progress into a best friendship between the two of them after initially they are at each other's throats constantly, especially Gimli. So here, seeing a dwarf and an elf fall in love is not really anything new. We've seen dwarves and elves become friends in the previous trilogy, and even though these movies take place before, it's not like it's foreshadowing anything. It's not like these characters are even related to Gimli. Like, and Tariel is related to Legolas, so maybe that's supposed to be like she's rubbing off on Legolas that now he can like dwarves too. But I just never really liked that, and it separates the dwarves from the rest of the company that goes to the Lonely Mountain, and I thought that was a wasted opportunity for the rest of them to all have a moment together. Albert and the steward of Lake Town, terrible. I just do not like them at all. Lake Town stuff is relatively average, except for Bard. They do a decent job with Bard. Smaug in this movie is fantastic, definitely saves it, and as well as the elf stuff, Mirkwood, Beorn's appearance in here is nice, but the Mirkwood stuff and all of the stuff in the forest with the dwarves and the elves when they're captured in the wine barrel thing was even more fun than I remember it in the novel. I do like a lot of stuff in this movie, and I think the good outweighs the bad, but the bad is enough to make it like why did they have to do that for some of these scenes? I think for that reason, I'm definitely going to put it in B. I think it's a significant step down from An Unexpected Journey, but definitely a significant step up from the next one we're going to talk about, which is The Battle of the Five Armies. And The Battle of the Five Armies is a movie that just feels unnecessary. I'm not the first to say it, and I won't be the last, but The Battle of the Five Armies was about maybe 3, 4 chapters in like a 300-page, 250-page book. And most of it just isn't written by Tolkien because Bilbo has a rock dropped on his head and he doesn't even witness the battle. And when he wakes up, it's over. So they definitely used the most creative liberty here that was not in the novel. That being said, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. The problem is, though, that this movie is still 2.5 hours and it feels very monotonous and redundant. The whole battle scene is about an hour and a half of this 2.5 hour movie, and it just goes on forever. And when it starts, there's some cool moments. I do like what they did with the Arkenstone stuff. I know dragon sickness isn't necessarily exactly in the novel, but the Arkenstone is causing Thorin to slowly lose his grip, and that's very much so part of the novel. Bilbo witnesses it. That's why the whole thing, Bilbo gives the Arkenstone to Bard and the rest of the people of Lake Town. All that's there. I think they do a good job of fleshing it out further. I actually like the first 30, 40 minutes of this movie quite a bit. I think it works quite well. The end of Smaug, I feel like should have been in the last movie though. Everything after that, when the battle starts, there's cool sequences, there's cool individual sequences for characters. I think the stuff with Thorin especially works quite well. But again, that's the stuff that's taken out of the book. So that's why it works, I think. All the additions, the like Legolas walking on the air, none of that stuff needs to be here. We already know Legolas is cool. You don't need to give us like a 10-minute scene of him doing other stuff. Overkill, really. It's overkill in a lot of sequences. And as cool as a scene like the dwarves lining up against the orcs to fight and the elves jumping over them and helping out. Those shots are awesome. I love that. But this movie, every time I watch it, by the time it's over, you're tired, you just want it to end. And it all just kind of feels like, why? We could have had an hour-long movie really out of this material. So really, you could have attached 30 minutes to the last movie and 30 minutes of Desolation of Smaug to an unexpected journey. Trimmed out some stuff. You have two nice 3-hour movies. I do like it better than the animated movies, and I do rewatch it every time I do a marathon of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So I'm going to put it in C. So thank you all so much for watching my tier list of the Middle Earth films. Let me know down below which ones you would rank and where you would rank them. What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? So let me know all of that down below in the comments. Like I said, if you haven't liked this video, that'll really help me out. And subscribe to the channel for continued content. I'll be releasing a Lord of the Rings character tier list tomorrow, so check that out. I'll also be talking about the Lord of the Rings show. I'm very excited for the show. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I'm very excited. I love Middle Earth. I love more stories in this world. So I cannot wait for that. And if you haven't checked out Star Wars Lads, check that out. That is the Star Wars channel that I'm posting constantly on. I've been doing a couple different series right now on there besides our traditional stuff that we do together. I've been doing the What If series. I just released a second episode. That's more of a comedic take on What If. It takes smaller, goofier moments in Star Wars and kind of explains what would happen if they didn't actually occur. First episode was on Palpatine's corkscrew from Revenge of the Sith, and the second episode, which just came out yesterday, is about what if Ben Swallow didn't have his shirt off when he met Rey in their third Force connection. So some really pressing issues there. You're going to want to check those videos out. I've also been doing the history of the Star Wars franchise, which has been one of the biggest, longest deep dive videos I've ever done. And those have been covering every single release from books, comics, video games, films, TV shows, and more in Star Wars from 1976 all the way to the present day. We have released 3 episodes so far. Look forward to all of that content. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.